You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. Previously, we have talked about class lessons and small groups. Today, I want to talk to you about that final tier, that most intensive counseling, and that's the one-on-one individual support that you provide. So remember, we have our pyramid, our 3 tiers. The bottom tier, all students are receiving instruction. The second tier, some students are receiving small group instruction in addition to the class lessons. And then finally, our third tier here are those individual kiddos. So they have likely already been in a small group, and of course, they're getting that whole class instruction. So let's talk about just the beginning, the basics here. Who will you see for your individual sessions? You may be confused on who am I supposed to be seeing for these. So you're likely getting referrals, as we talked about before. Now, there's a couple ways to determine who you will see individually. The referrals that you received before, let's say that you received 5 referrals, 4 were for social skills, and 1 was for anger management. And all of these were about the same severity, like not super severe, just, trying to be preventative, seeing a few problems, but not crazy. Well, as we said last time, you would group the 4 together, do a social skills group, boom. Well, the anger management kiddo, he might not really need that intensive one-on-one. Maybe he would benefit from a group, but there's no one else who's, having the similar need. So in that case, you're not just going to tell him wait a while until I find some other kids for an anger management group. That's probably not a good idea, right? We want to provide those services right away. So in that case, you could see him at an individual level. Now, or let's say the same thing happened. You get 4 social skills referrals, and 3 of those are kind of a mild concern, and 1 is a pretty strong concern. That strong concern, maybe you put them in the group with the others, but in addition, you're going to see them individually as well, because they might need a little extra support. These are also your students who are having some private, confidential issues that they may not want to share with others, such as family problems, divorce, or even in some cases, grief. So I do grief groups because I think there's a lot of healing that can be done in a group setting, but sometimes, the situation arises where the student may just prefer to keep it private and do one-on-one. So those are some ways to determine who you will see for your individual sessions. Now, once you determine who you're going to see, the big question we always get, right? When will I see them? So you're busy. And I promise we're going to have this episode on scheduling. I keep teasing it up. I'm going to have to make it a good one because I swear I mention it in every other episode. But yes, scheduling is a challenge. So when are you going to see these individual students? Well, you're going to pull them out of class likely for a 30-minute time. So we mentioned lunch earlier in the other episode for groups. The lunch bunch is a good idea. But for a one-on-one, that's probably not the best time. You probably are going to have to pull them out of class. But again, this is a high need. So hopefully and likely the teacher will understand the severity of the need and will be supportive in this. And they can make up their work afterwards. I recommend seeing them once a week for about 20 minutes, sometimes 30. Sometimes 30 can be too long. As I mentioned in the groups episode from last week, the groups have a lot of procedures that you're doing each time, and you're kind of wrangling, or let's be real, herding cats sometimes. Okay, everyone sign in, and it's sometimes can be a little crazy with a group. But with an individual, you kind of get straight to the point. You get down to it a lot faster. There's no need for a sign-in sheet really, because if you're seeing them or not. And then you don't really need group rules because there's just one person. So some of those things can be cut out, meaning that you likely only need 20 minutes instead of a 30-minute session. And then I recommend meeting with them the same as I said with groups for about 6 to 8 weeks. And then you can reevaluate to see if they need continued sessions or an outside referral. So this is super important. I don't want you to miss this, that you are solution focused, right? And we're trying to help kids succeed in an academic setting because we're a school counselor. So we want to provide them with the social, emotional support that they need to thrive in an academic setting. So you're not a therapist, so you're not here to do long-term intensive care, and that can be misconstrued a lot of times. I know my first year counseling, I got kids referred to me in August and I was still seeing them in May. That's a problem. You're creating codependence. The kids aren't even having time to try out these strategies you're working on because they're just coming to you all the time. So you want to build that bond, but you do want to be mindful of this. So what I recommend is data. Data is the answer here. Use a self-assessment. Have the kids self-assess how they're doing before and after each group. And then you can also use some behavior rating scales. So you can send these to parents and teachers to fill out surveys before and after the group to see if they think the student's making progress. If the student is making progress, then you can stop the sessions after 6 or 8 weeks and then kind of keep an eye out and watch them, hopefully implement the strategies that they've learned with you. So, for example, let's say this is a self-regulation, a child who's struggling with self-regulation, and you're teaching them some coping strategies for that. See, give them a chance to succeed. Give them a chance to fail, right? Give them a chance to try independently with maybe just little check-ins instead of that weekly meeting after they learn the skill, of course. Now, let's say you get this feedback back. The kid doesn't feel confident in the self-assessment. The parents haven't noticed improvement. The teacher hasn't noticed improvement. Then you may want to reevaluate. You can either continue, or what you're doing is not working, which is okay. It happens. But maybe you need to assess it, switch it up a little, or refer out to a different professional outside of the school system who can help. So those are things that you do want to keep in mind. Now, also, when will you meet with your students? You may meet with some students one time individually. So these are more check-in situations. If someone is, having a lot of behavior issues, or if the teacher knows about something that's going on at home and wants you to check in, you'll probably do a one-time check-in and then maybe a follow-up. But for every situation that arises, it doesn't mean that they need to meet with you weekly for 8 weeks, right? And that's pretty intensive. So again, we want to utilize those 3 tiers in our process here. And your school likely has a process of intervention, right? So the response to intervention process. So for example, we know the kid is getting this tier 1 support through guidance lessons, class lessons, and then you can try a group. Let's say the group graduates and 4 out of 6 students are showing a lot of improvement, so they're going to graduate. So the other 2, obviously, we tell them they graduated too. We don't want them to feel like they failed group. But maybe you and the teacher know that they still need a little more help with the skill, so then maybe you see them in a one-on-one setting. There may be some students who are intimidated by a group setting and feel more comfortable working one-on-one, and maybe that's a reason why you would see them as well. So those are who you're meeting with and when you're meeting with them. And I want to remind you, just to touch back on this, because I do think it's important about not creating codependence. ASCA says in their school counselor competencies that we are to provide short-term counseling in small group and individual settings, and explain the difference between appropriate short-term counseling and inappropriate long-term therapy. So ASCA says that straight up. So you want to make sure that you are doing short-term counseling, not long-term therapy. They also say make referrals to appropriate school and community resources, and communicate the limits of school counseling in the continuum of mental health services. And finally, articulate why diagnoses and long-term therapy are outside the scope of school counseling. So all that I just read is straight from ASCA School Counselor Competencies. So you want to be prepared with that information, and I can link to that in the show notes. So you can regurgitate that to parents or to teachers who are like, no, he needs more. Then, we need to assess what we're doing. And we don't want to leave this kid with no support, but maybe just the one-on-one once a week with the school counselor isn't enough, and maybe we need outside community support. Okay, so how do you stay organized? I have a really simple method that I do with kids. I have a manila folder, their names on it, and then I put everything we work on in there, and I write on the left-hand flap the date I see them and what we worked on. Super basic. You can also do this digitally as well. And after each session, I give them a sticker to put on their folder. And the kids love this. It's kind of a progress tracker, as we mentioned in the groups episode. It's a way for them to, see how many sessions they've done, how many they have remaining, and they feel like cool and fun to get to pick out the stickers. And I have some great stickers I found on Amazon. I'll actually link to those in the show notes as well. Just super fun ones, like funny stuff. The kids loved them. Big sticker person. So what are you going to do during these individual sessions? So during the first session, I recommend keeping it very light and you're just building rapport. I know sometimes as counselors we want to help. We know background about the student. We want to dive straight in. Not always the best approach, or never really the best approach. We want to make the kid feel comfortable. They're one-on-one with an adult. They're likely feeling a little intimidated, especially if they haven't met you before. I mean, they probably know you from class lessons, but maybe they haven't met with you one-on-one before. So you want to make them feel comfortable. I like to play like a get-to-know-you game, maybe a get-to-know-you Jenga, 2 truths and a tale, something like that, just to get them to loosen up a little bit. And you can even don't be afraid to do like coloring or puzzles. I find that a lot of times kids talk more when their hands are busy and when they're not just staring at you sitting in a chair, right? They're sitting in a hard little blue chair staring at you. That's intimidating. Even virtually, just like one-on-one on the screen can be intimidating. So maybe have them use modeling clay or draw or paint or do something while you're talking. You'll be surprised. You could even use like a sand tray or one of the toy houses if you're chatting about family things. I don't usually do those things, but that is an option. I know some counselors really like to do that. So similarly to the group, your session is going to have a purpose. So I kind of like to do it 50-50. You do a little warm-up, just chatting, and then you want to give them some, as I call it, the meat and potatoes. Maybe give them a strategy they can work on or a tool they can use. And then have them try it out for the week and then report back and see how it goes. Journaling is also something they can do. In the group setting, the journaling is a little better. They're all doing it at the same time, and you can kind of walk around and, look at it and monitor. But in the one-on-one, if they're journaling, you're just kind of sitting there. I don't know. I don't find it's the best use of time. So maybe have them work on a journal outside of your sessions, and then they can bring it to you when they're not there. They can bring it to you when you meet the next time. So those are some ideas for what you can do with your individual students. I hope you found this helpful. And now we have had 3 episodes on all 3 tiers. So hopefully you feel prepared to implement your counseling services at the class lesson level, at the group level, and at the individual level. All right, you've got this. I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.